Hello and welcome. In this video we are going to create the project directory and the HTML. So I'm going to create the directory on my desktop. I'm just going to right click and go new folder, and I'm just going to call this BMI calculator. So you can call yours whatever name you like. And you can create folder the same way on a Mac and also on a Windows-based computer. I will be using the Sublime Text Editor as my editor for this project. So I've got a new file here inside my editor. I'm just going to save this file as an HTML document. So I'm going to go File, and I'm going to do a Save As. And I'm saving it into the directory I've just created, and I'm going to call it bmi.html, and I'll click on the drop down and just select HTML and click save. So any code I have in here now will become an HTML file. So you can see on the bottom right of the text editor is called HTML there. So the way I'm going to approach this is I'm going to add the code in. I've already pre-staged the code, so I'll add the code and I'll explain what the code does line by line. I have added the HTML code that we'll be using for this project. So I'm going to run through the code with you line by line. Line 1 here is the doc type, and the doc type is not actually part of the HTML document. It's basically a declaration to web browsers to tell them that the content of the document is an HTML5 document. From line 2 to line 35 is the actual HTML document. So any content within line 2 to 35 is the HTML content. So we have the head section, which is on line 3 to line 7. So the information within the head section is not actually visible to the visitors of the application. The only thing that you can see in the title bar is the title of the application, which will appear on the title bar or when the application is launched. On line 5, I've got a link to the external style sheet I will be using for this project. I'm going to be using an external CSS file. I've called it bmi.css. However, I have not created it yet, but when I do, I will call it bmi.css. Okay, and you can see the rel this is an attribute, is called rel. Basically, you use that when you are linking to an external style sheet. And this is another attribute that tells you the type of document. It's a text and it's also CSS. The href attribute basically is a reference to where the file is going to be located. Because it's going to be located inside the same directory as the HTML file, all we need to do is just include the name in quotes. And this is where the head section ends on line 7. The body section begins on line 9 and ends on line 34. So any content inside the body tag is what is actually visible to the visitor. Inside the body tag on line 11, I've got a div element and I've given it an ID attribute of container. So this is the opening div and this is the closing div here. So I'm basically wrapping all the content inside this div called container. Inside the div, I've got an h1 heading tag. This basically is going to form the title for the application. And I have got 3 inputs here. This is going to be the form where you're going to input the actual value of your height in centimeter. And you can see here it says height in centimeter. This was just going to be a label for the input box, so where they need to enter the height in centimeter. This break here basically means it will give a break between this input and this other input here. So I've got another input tag, and I've got weight in kilogram. This is basically going to be the text next to the input. Again, I've given the input type text. The input type is a text, and I've given it an ID attribute of centimeter. Yeah, same thing with the weight here. This input type is going to be a text input, and again I've given it an ID value of kilogram, kg, and BR basically means break, so it will leave it will jump onto the break. Kind of like works like a paragraph. It just creates a break. I've got another input type here. This is going to act as the submit button, and I've given it an ID of submit. The value is going to be calculate. That means the button will actually read calculate. So when you press on the calculate button, it will do the actual calculation of the BMI. Here I've got an ID, and I've given it a value of result. Again, this is another div. This div will display the result of the calculated BMI. So this is where the output will be rendered. I've got another div here called weight guide. This basically is just some text guide that will guide users as to whether they are underweight, overweight in relation to their BMI. So it will just say BMI weight guide. If you're underweight, this is the value, anything 18.6. If you're normal range or normal weight, it will be 18.6 and 24.9. So anything greater than 24.9 is going to be regarded as overweight. All right, and this is where the div ends. And just before the closing body tag, I've got the script tag with the source. Source basically means where am I getting the script from. This is going to be the external JavaScript. This is the JavaScript file that will contain the JavaScript that will be responsible for computing or calculating the BMI. And I'm going to call the JavaScript file bmi.js. I've not created it yet, but when I do, I'm going to call it bmi.js, and that's the closing script tag, my closing body tag, and my closing HTML. I'm just going to click on save to save all, and I'll quickly open up the file so we can see what it looks like. So I'm going to open up the directory and just double click on this so we can see. All right, so this is what the calculator looks like at the moment, the BMI calculator. So we're going to add some CSS later to make it look more presentable. So that's it for this lecture. We've created the directory for the project. We've also created the HTML structure. In the next lecture, I'm going to add some CSS before we go on in the lecture after that to create the JavaScript functionality. Many thanks for watching, and bye for now.